it's Lori, and welcome back to my channel, Books, Ink, and Paper. I'm happy you joined me today for my September wrap-up video. This is the one where we talk about what I read in September and how I liked it. So when I was preparing for this video today, I recognized that I only have 2 of the books I read in September in my physical possession anymore. I lent one to my daughter this weekend to take back with her and read, and then the others came from the library, I think, each of them. So they've been returned. So this is interesting. I have not a lot of these books to show, but I can tell you about them and how much I like them. So let's get started. So the first book I read in September is Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. This is the first novel written by him that I have read, although I've heard good things about some of his other novels for sure. But this one, for some reason, really intrigued me. I think it was the plot and the fact that it was just interesting as a thriller plot to me. So this book, and for some reason I have not rated it yet, and so I need to check because I don't think it was on my 5-star prediction video, so I don't know why I didn't rate it yet. That's weird. So I'll maybe by the time I finish telling you about it, I'll be able to tell you what I rated it. So this book follows a young woman who is kind of down on her luck. Her boyfriend, she caught him cheating on her in their home, sleeping with another woman, and she doesn't have a lot of money, and so she reads an ad in the newspaper, and I'm trying to see what her name is. Jules is her name. She reads an ad in the newspaper, and they're looking for an apartment sitter in a very prestigious hotel, the Bartholomew, and it's a very well-paying job, and all she has to do is sit in the apartment, essentially. When she gets there to interview for this job, she discovers that there's a little more to it. So she has to never have anyone over. There's also a couple of other rules. She can't not spend the night there. She always has to stay there. I can't think of what the others were, but there are a good number of rules. Then she discovers that the Bartholomew has kind of a mysterious, sinister past, and a lot of people have perished there. So that worries her a little bit. And then she discovers that there are some other apartment sitters in the building too, and she makes friends with them. And one of them, Ingrid, almost immediately after they become friends, Ingrid disappears. Now, none of this is a spoiler for you because all of this is in the synopsis on Goodreads. I was just making sure that I wasn't spoiling anything for you. It's a great psychological thriller. It has one of the most interesting scenes that I have read in a thriller, and it involves a dumbwaiter, which really it was very, very clever and very well written, and I still can't forget that scene. It also has a great number of characters, and you don't know kind of how they all interact, but you have this feeling that there's a reason why she keeps sort of, meeting these different people in the apartment complex, and it's just really, really good. And so now that I'm telling you about it and I realize that I didn't rate it for whatever reason, I am going to solidly say I gave it 4.5 stars. It was just shy of 5 stars, and I don't know why exactly, but I do feel in my heart like it wasn't quite there, but I really, really liked it a lot. Then I read An Unwanted Guest by Shari Lapena, and I keep calling this an uninvited guest, and I don't know why, because I think I'm getting it confused with the book I'm currently listening to. Nevertheless, An Unwanted Guest by Shari Lapena. This is the third of hers that I have read, but one of them I read already this month in October. I listened to it. So, but when I read this, it was the second of hers. I read The Couple Next Door and then this one too. I think this is my favorite of hers. I love an isolated house mystery, and so this was an isolated hotel mystery, but it was a little bed and breakfast home. A bunch of people came for the weekend. They got snowed in. This is also a snowed in mystery, which I also adore. They were snowed in, the power went out, they didn't have phone access, and they discover that one of the guests has been murdered. And there's a detective that's also staying there, and a couple of friends, one of whom has some PTSD, and another a couple who's in a romantic relationship, an author. There's just a lot of really neat um, personalities, and the people that own the bed and breakfast have their own character arcs, and she just did a really good job, and I, honest to goodness, couldn't put it down. Let me see, I think I started, yeah, I read this book in one day. I happened to be sick that weekend, but still, I read this book in one day. Right after I came back from DC, I think you remember, if you've been watching my videos, I had a really, really horrific cold, and I just settled in on my couch, even though it was 100 degrees here, and finished this book about this winter journey that these people took, and what happened in this hotel. I highly recommend this one. I gave it 4 stars. Then this is the book for which I should win a particular award. This is Face the Fire by Nora Roberts. This is the third in the Three Sisters Island trilogy. I read the first 2 last month. This was on my summer TBR list because it was a good summer read, at least the first one was. By the time we got to this one, I think it was winter. But the first one was my favorite, and they progressively just kind of didn't really satisfy as much, but it's a paranormal romance trilogy written by Nora Roberts. She's done a really good job of paranormal romance in the past, I thought, but maybe I should reread those books. Maybe I was in a very different place. I don't know, but I'm glad I finished it. I'm glad I got this deckle-edged copy. They all 3 match, and it was all right. I mean, it wasn't horrible. I gave it 3 stars. So, I mean, it wasn't like a 1-star read, but the second one was my least favorite. This one I liked a little bit more, and I'm glad it wrapped up because I couldn't have done another book about them. Then I read and finished The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert, which was also on my summer TBR. So I got a really good amount of books read that were on my summer TBR and finished them before the summer fall equinox, which was my goal. This is a young adult novel. It won the Goodreads Award for Young Adult Novel in 2018, I think. It's a young adult fantasy novel about a girl who her grandmother wrote fairy tales, and they were very, very popular, and then they're out of print, and they're very rare and hard to find. Her mother had a terrible relationship with the grandmother, and so Alice, the girl, and her mother have been sort of transient together, living in various places all of their lives, and odd things happen to them even as the backstory is unfolding. You discover that like they're forced to move because this happens or that happens, and they just have a really not necessarily dysfunctional life, but a really nomadic life. And Alice is now a teenager, and she's in high school in this little town, and her mother has married a man at this point, and so she has a stepsister as well, and they live pretty affluently now. This guy had a lot of money. And weird things start to happen around Alice. She sees a guy at a coffee shop that she thinks she recognizes from when she was kidnapped as a child. One of the weird things that happened. She was kidnapped as a child, and the guy told her that he was taking her to see her grandmother. And then she was discovered and returned to her mom. But weird things start to happen, and she is more and more sort of convinced that they're somehow related and correlated with her grandmother. and then it just takes off. And she has a friend from high school who is a super crazy fan of her grandmother's work, and she enlists his help to try to figure out what's going on, and what's going on with her mom. I've heard some people don't like this book, but I really liked it. It was a neat story. It was stories within a story within a story. It unfolded in a way that was well paced, I thought, and I adored it. My daughter started it this weekend, and it seems like she's liking it a lot too. It is confusing. I heard a friend of mine on BookTube say it just confused her, and it is confusing. There's no question. But it's very visual. It's very funny. It also has references to many other books, young adult books, and other writers and other fairy tales. It is the character of Alice, to me, is so neat. She's strong, she's determined, she questions everything, and yet she's also open to the fact that something really mysterious is happening. So I really enjoyed the Hazelwood. I understand that it's book one of a series because it's billed as book one. So my sense is that there will be more books in this series by this writer. I do think it's also been optioned as a film. I think it would make a fantastic adaptation if done well. So it's more adult for certain than Harry Potter. In fact, my daughter at one point said, because I had said it's definitely for a very savvy, mature young adult. And this weekend she said, "Are you sure this is young adult?" And I looked it up again, and it is. It's got a lot of language. It's got some reference to sex. It's got some stuff in it, but it's also just lovely. So if you're looking for a young adult for your child, you might want to read it first to make sure that it's something that you want your child to read. But I never did do that. I just kind of let my kids read whatever they want, and still do. But I thought about whether my granddaughter would be up to the task, and she's not quite yet. But just because of her age, I think, and her ability, I think, to understand the nuances and the depth of this book. It is, again, it's pretty intense, I would say, for a reader who's maybe I would say it's better, let's just say this, I would say it's better for an older young adult, maybe 16 to 18, I would say. Then I picked up Recursion by Blake Crouch. I had been hearing some buzz. My daughter had gotten it on Audible. My son had gotten it when we went to DC, and the plot was just so compelling that I decided I'm going to check and see if they have it at the library. And I added it to my Contemporary-a-thon TBR because they did. Had it in ebook, had it on Audible, and I had it in hardback. And I started it on the 14th, and I finished it on the 27th, which is long. I could have finished that book in 3 days if I hadn't had so much going on at work. I truly could have. I loved Recursion. I talk about it in the wrap up for Contemporary-a-thon too, but I loved it so much. This plot was so unique, so compelling. The beginning was a little slow, I think, but it needed to be because you needed to have all the information that you could to be able to understand the rest of it. Is it confusing at times? Absolutely. It jumps around a lot from past to present, back to the past, back to the present. It is a fantastic premise. If you don't know, it is about an epidemic of something that is being called false memory syndrome, where people begin to have memories of things in their lives that didn't ever happen. And it's causing them a lot of confusion and pain, and they are just unable to take it in. I'll just say that. I don't want to spoil this at all, but I got to tell you, this was a 5-star read for me. I was delighted by it. I immediately used one of my Libro credits to buy Dark Matter because it's been kind of in my head for a while and on my TBR list on Goodreads, but I had not purchased it or gotten it. I do plan to finish the Wayward Pines trilogy now because I'd only read one. Like, I am a huge new fan of Blake Crouch. Huge. And I loved the first book of the Wayward Pines series. It was very good. This book, though, I want to buy it. I want to read it again. I want to talk about it to everybody. My partner read it, my son, my daughter, I've read it. I recommended it to my friend. I can't wait to read it again. I really, really can't. I would tell you what book it reminds me of, but then I feel like you would know what some of the important key plot points are, and I don't want to spoil anything. No spoilers. Not even I'm going to stop the video now and tell you and then go back. No, I just want everybody to experience it in the moment like I did, and I hope you love it as much as we all have loved it very, very much. And then the last book that I finished in September is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I do have a physical copy of this. It's actually a signed copy of this. And I had just been able to meet her recently. My daughter had read this one. Several of my friends had read this one. No one I knew didn't like it. And I thought, okay, it's time. So I added this to Contemporary-thon TBR 2 and finished it. So I finished 2 books that week. Loved it. 5 stars. Clearly a story that needs to be told. Very timely. Great perspectives of access to access for minorities in school, in life, in work. Great story about what makes people decide to make choices in their lives, what's happening in their lives that causes them to make choices that we see as, illegal, obviously, and we see as detrimental to their lives. But there's a lot more to that, and I've always known that. I mean, I've worked with families and children for a long time, but this book is a story that really does unravel some of that for you from a perspective of a teenage girl. Star is the name of the main character. She is at a party one night. She's in high school. She's at a party one night, and she sees her friend from childhood, and they haven't seen each other in a while. And a shooting, someone shoots off a gun, and I think someone is actually shot at the party too, or injured. Shot, injured, something happened. So her friend offers to take her home, and on the way home, they're stopped by the police, and he's murdered by a police officer, and she witnesses all of it. And then she has this experience of having been traumatized by yet another death in her life. She also witnessed the death of a friend years before, her childhood friend. She doesn't want people to know that she was the witness. She's also feeling like she needs to tell the story because of the way that people are portraying her friend. And it's just so well done. 5 stars. Read it. Young adult. Difficult subject matter, but very, very important read. Just read it. I'm gonna read the next book that she wrote too. I should have bought it that day, and I just was trying to be on a nice budget, and I didn't. Okay, so those are the books that I read this month. There were 6 altogether, which is good for me, I would say. That's pretty normal, I guess. No nonfiction this month, so I would say 2 thrillers. I guess I would say 3 thrillers. Recursion and An Unwanted Guest and Lock Every Door. An Unwanted Guest, more of a murder mystery, but still a bit of a thriller. Face the Fire, paranormal romance, so that's odd for me. The Hazelwood fantasy, and The Hate You Give, contemporary young adult. A nice, well-rounded month of reading. So I hope you'll take a look at some of these books if you haven't already, and if you have, let me know what you thought of them. I'd be very curious. to see how many of you have read Recursion and if you liked it as much as I did. It reminded me, this isn't a spoiler, but when I read The Martian by Andy Weir, it was confusing to me, and some of the science and the concepts in that book, I thought, oh gosh, I'm not going to be able to figure this out. But the plot was so compelling that I didn't care. I just agreed not to understand and to, carry forth. And so I would say that's the way to approach that book. The same with the Hazelwood. Was I confused sometimes? Absolutely. But it didn't, I knew that it was all going to be okay. I had faith that I would figure it all out. So thanks again for watching and for subscribing if you haven't. If you haven't already, I would love for you to do that. I love the days where I see I have new subscribers, and I love hearing from you about what you read and what you like and what you don't like. And it's just wonderful. So please subscribe if you haven't already, and you can click the button at the top of the web page, and just it'll notify you when I have a new video out, so you won't miss a thing. Even though I'm going to be gone for an entire week, I think I'll be able to maybe record some videos while I'm away, but I'll for certain be able to record some before leaving and get them scheduled and uploaded. So have a great fall day wherever you live. I hope it is cooler than it is where I live. And as always, happy reading. Bye.